Have you ever imagined a giant squid being raised like fish on a marine farm like salmon farming, but with an abyss monster? Sounds like a movie, right? But the question is real. Can we raise giant squids in captivity? And if we could, why doesn't anyone do it? Today, I'm going to show you what science actually knows, what people have already tried with normal squids, and why the giant squid is basically the final boss of aquaculture. And stay until the end, because I'll give you 3 options for the next videos and you'll choose which one I make first. First things first, when we say giant squid, most people are thinking about that legendary deep-sea creature with enormous eyes and tentacles that look like cables, and yes, it's real. There are records, strandings, accidental catches, and a few extremely rare video sightings. But here's the key point. It spends most of its life in an environment humans can barely access. And that's the first trap in this topic, because raising in captivity isn't just keeping an animal alive for a few days. Raising it for real means mastering the full cycle, getting eggs or hatchlings, growing them to adulthood, and getting reproduction in captivity to close the loop. That's what turns an animal from a curiosity into something truly farmable. Now, why would anyone even want to raise a giant squid? It sounds crazy, but there are very real reasons. First, scientific research. Understanding how an animal like this grows, hunts, moves, and reproduces would be a huge leap in what we know about life in the abyss. Second, conservation. If deep-sea environments suffer bigger impacts someday, and yes, this is discussed because of climate change and human activity, knowing more about key deep-sea species could matter. Third, technology and, in theory, economics. Not necessarily to sell giant squid at the market, but because cephalopods like squids and octopuses are valuable and there's demand. The problem is, raising cephalopods is already difficult, and the giant squid is the maximum difficulty level. To understand why it's so hard, let's start with what already exists: raising smaller squids and cephalopod research in labs. Cephalopods are intelligent, curious, and extremely sensitive to their environment. They're not passive animals like many people imagine, and that matters a lot for welfare and survival in captivity. In bad conditions, a squid can get stressed, refuse food, slam into tank walls, injure itself, and in some species, you can even see aggression and cannibalism if the management is poor. In other words, this is not an easy animal to keep, especially if your goal is healthy growth. Now imagine taking that complexity and dropping it into the deep-sea context. And here comes problem number 1, the abyssal habitat. The deep sea isn't just deeper, it's practically another planet. First, pressure. The deeper you go, the higher the pressure. At great depths, pressure is extreme, and many organisms are adapted to it in ways we can't just fake in a normal aquarium. Second, temperature. The water is colder and very stable. A small change can be a big deal for the animal's metabolism. Third, light. It's almost total darkness. Deep-sea life is not built for constant brightness. Fourth, space and behavior. We don't know exactly how far a giant squid travels, but it wasn't designed to live in a box. It hunts, moves, responds to stimuli, and inadequate confinement can trigger serious stress. So right from the start, raising one would require something that is not a big aquarium. It would be a high-tech structure with fine control of temperature, oxygenation, and most importantly, the ability to simulate pressure. That's expensive, complex, and risky. And if you're into this kind of topic, drop a like right now because it helps the video reach more people who also love ocean science and deep sea mystery. Okay, but let's say someone has the money, the technology, and the courage. Even then, there's problem number 2. The giant squid's life cycle is full of missing pieces. To raise an animal, you need a starting point, usually eggs or hatchlings. But a giant squid is rarely found alive. Most encounters happen by accident. Sometimes it strands, sometimes it shows up in deep-sea fishing nets, sometimes it appears in isolated records. And even if you get a live individual, that still doesn't solve everything. You still need to understand how it reproduces, what the eggs are like, where it lays them, how the young behave, what they eat early on. Because in cephalopods, early life stages can be extremely delicate and sensitive. And then comes problem number 3, which might be the harshest and the most ignored by people who just think technology solves everything. Adaptation to captivity. Cephalopods have high behavioral complexity. They explore, react, remember, learn. That means a captive environment can literally become a trigger for suffering if it's wrong. Many deep-sea animals live with a very specific stimulus pattern. Low noise, low light, minimal environmental shocks. A tank of it. An advanced one has vibration, human presence, artificial routines, walls, limits. That's why, even in scientific contexts, keeping certain animals alive for long periods can be extremely difficult. Now let me turn that into a clear scenario. If someone tried to raise giant squid for real today, what would be necessary? First, pressurized tanks on a large scale, because it can't be tiny. This isn't a simple experiment. Second, simulation of ocean currents, because water movement affects oxygen, locomotion, and behavior. Third, rigid control of temperature and water chemistry. Fourth, extremely specific feeding. Probably fish, crustaceans, maybe live prey, or an extremely well-designed diet with the right frequency and amounts. Fifth, constant monitoring with sensors and cameras and, even then, without stressing the animal. Sixth and, most important, a reliable way to obtain eggs or juveniles. Because without that, you will never close the life cycle. Too close. I am giving you 3 options for the next video, and you choose which one I make first. Comment only the number. Option 1 is the octopus as intelligent as we think. Real and bizarre experiments. Option 2, the 7 scariest abyss creatures that actually exist. Option 3, the biggest mysterious animal ever seen. What science knows and what is still theory. Comment 1, 2, or 3. Which one do you want next? Thanks for watching, and remember, the ocean is the biggest alien world here on Earth.